I used to be on the math team in high school, and on the back of our math team shirts, we had this saying, there is no square root of -1 in team. And so now, based on what you know, you should be able to crack this riddle. And so square root of -1 is the same thing as I. So what it's really saying is there is no I in team. Wah, wah, wah. All right, so now I'm going to talk about the powers of I. And so before I talk about that, let me recap what you would do normally if you took the square root of 2 to the first power, square root of 2 to the second power, and so on. How would you solve that? And then we translate that to I, and you'd see that it's the same concept. So square root of 2 to the first power is just the square root of 2. Square root of 2 to the second power is the same thing as saying square root of 2 times square root of 2, right? And then the square root of 2 is the same thing as saying 2 to the 1/2 power. So 2 to the 1/2 power. And if I had an expression like x squared times x to the first power, what you do is you just add those exponents, right? So it would be x cubed. And if I had something like x to the 1/2 times x to the 1/2, you do the same thing. You just add those exponents. So you just get x. So in this case, when you have 2 to the 1/2 and 2 to the 1/2, you just add those exponents and you get 2 to the 1 to the first power, which equals 2. All right, so square root of 2 to the second power equals 2. Now, so the third one, square root of 2 to the third power equals square root of 2 times square root of 2 times square root of 2, right? But this we already solved as being equal to 2. So we could just replace this 2 for the square root of 2 times square root of 2. So it would be 2 square root of 2. All right, and also the next one. So this would be square root of 2 times square root of 2 times square root of 2 times square root of 2. All right. But we know that this square root of 2 times square root of 2 equals 2. Square root of 2 times square root of 2 also equals 2. So same thing as saying 2 times 2. And so this equals 4. All right, so let's do the last one. We have square root of 2 times 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 square root of 2. And then same thing, we know we could break this up. And we know that inside these parentheses, it's just going to be the square root, it's just going to be 2. So we have 2 times 2, and then we have 1 left over square root of 2. So this reduces to 4 root 2. All right, so that's how you'd solve what the square root of 2 to these individual powers are. Okay, I just moved it all to fit into the screen. All right, and so I just want to do this so then I can almost parallel what it's like to take I and raise it to these different powers. So square root of 2 is the same thing as saying square root of 2. All right, square root of 2 to the first power equals square root of 2. And so when we do I to the first power, remember I equals the square root of -1 raised to the first power. And that's going to equal just the square root of -1. And so I to the first power is just I. All right, so let's do I squared. So I squared equals square root of -1 times square root of -1. And that equals -1 to the 1/2 times -1 to the 1/2. And remember, we just add these exponents right here. And so 1/2 plus 1/2 equals 1. So it's -1 to the first power. And that's just going to equal -1. So I squared equals -1. All right. And now let's go and do I cubed. So square root of 2 to the cubed equals square root of 2 times square root of 2 times square root of 2. So in the same way, I cubed is the same thing as saying square root of negative 1 times square root of negative 1 times square root of negative 1. And then you look at this, and we know that this is the same thing as I squared. You see that? So that's going to reduce to negative 1. And so this whole thing gets reduced to just negative 1 square root of negative 1. And so that equals negative times square root of negative 1. And then we know what square root of negative 1 equals. That equals I, right? And so we could say that this just equals negative I. So I cubed equals negative I. Let's do I to the fourth. So we say square root of negative 1 times square root of negative 1 times square root of negative 1 times square root of negative 1. Oops. I don't know why I did that. Same square root of negative 1. And then we could break this up. And we know that square root of negative 1 times square root of negative 1 is the same thing as I squared. And that's going to equal negative 1. So we could reduce this to negative 1 and negative 1. And negative 1 times negative 1 equals 1. So I to the fourth equals 1. And finally, I to the fifth is just square root of negative 1 times square root of negative 1. Is that? And then we can break that up. And know that each one of these equals negative 1. Then we have that left over. And so negative 1 times negative 1 is just 1 times square root of negative 1. And then what's square root of negative 1? It's I, right? So I to the fifth equals I. All right? And then we can continue and keep going down to the I to the sixth, I to the seventh, and so on. But I think you get the idea.